Where's the second one? Oh.
Yeah, hello. Yes, sir. I Church Society petition.
Good morning. Good morning, gentlemen. Hello, we're about to start. I'm going to make a unilateral decision because the Prime Minister speaks at 11:15 and a lot of you want to get into the hall, and I know Tim, being a media tart, has got some radio to do. Me being a media tart, I have some radio to do too, so we're going to probably end this about 11:15 if that's okay. So I'll introduce myself. I'm Andrew Pearce from the Daily Mail. On my right is Phillip Blond from ResPublica, Tim Montgomery from Conservative Home, the Bishop who needs no introduction at all, and the legendary Matthew Parris. I'm going to ask everybody to speak briefly, 2 minutes each to make their case, and then I'm going to go straight into the audience for questions because we are curtailed for time. So let's ask first Phillip Blond if he can distract himself from his laptop.
No, we'll just do it like this. Thank you very much. My fundamental reason for opposing gay marriage is I think gay marriage is homophobic. And I think it's a homophobic institution or proposal because it suggests that homosexuality isn't valid in its own right, and what it has to do is mimic heterosexual structures. And I think that taking 2 steps back from that, I think we're in a situation now where we are no longer protecting a society where people differ and where people are different, and we are no longer creating a free and plural society within which human beings have different accounts of themselves. And what is actually happening under a Conservative government is what some of the worst aspects of the left are being rolled out. And that is that what we're pursuing is an idea that in order to have equality, everybody has to be the same. And equality used to be used as a means to protect the different. Now equality is being used as a means to repress the different. And as such, what's going on is highly pernicious, because what we're suggesting is there is no institution that belongs to heterosexuals qua their heterosexuality. And because we're saying that there is nothing that belongs to heterosexual life, what we're actually saying is we can't structure heterosexual life. Because what marriage does is a structuring that's particular to heterosexual life. And if we say that actually any mode can fulfill that, what we're saying is that actually there's nothing particular to heterosexuality itself. And then what we're arguing is sexuality isn't in some sense fixed, but it's all within a disordered universe where people can take up any position that they want. But I think the whole of human history is about creating institutions that foster certain self-evident goods, and those certain self-evident goods are behaviours oriented to a certain fulfilment. And I believe in civil partnerships for gay people, because I believe there's something that belongs to gay people qua their homosexuality. And I actually believe that gay people's civil partnerships should be blessed in church. And I think in being blessed in church, what you then have is a validation of homosexuality and a different validation of heterosexuality. But we're now living in a world where we destroy difference in the name of equality, just like we destroyed Catholic adoption agencies, just like the communist states tried to destroy any form of loyalty that didn't pertain to the central state. We're now destroying any form of particularity in the name of equality. And this seems to me to run profoundly counter to both conservative and to liberal traditions. And in preserving a free society, we have to ask what a free society looks like. A free society is composed of people who are different, and it's composed of different forms of associations. And if we start to say, actually, you're all the same, we're doing what the worst aspects of the communist left did. And what I think we need to do, and what we need to do, in my view, is celebrate homosexuality, as a form of life that also needs structuring. But the last thing we should do is claim that actually one mode of being is the same as another mode of being, because that's what communism did, and we saw where that ended up.
Thank you. Matthew Parris, you support civil partnerships, you're in a civil... you support gay marriage, you're a homophobe, according to Phillip Blond.
Yes, I think I understand. Oh yeah, well, better use this, haven't I? I think I understand Philip's argument, but I honestly can't be bothered with it. There's nothing homophobic about gay marriage. There are plenty of institutions that rejoice in one name and yet differ greatly within themselves. We have charities in Britain. There are lots of different kinds of charities for different kinds of purposes. There are no doubt lots of different kinds of marriages. Some people marry for companionship, other people marry to have children, other people never intend to have children. And Philip prefers we can have gay marriage and straight marriage, and then we'll have a special name of our own. Names don't mean that much to me, but prejudice does. And I've fought within the Conservative Party ever since I was a new member of Parliament for equal recognition for gay men. I know which side I'm on. I know which side the Bishop is on. I know which side a lot of those people who are opposing gay marriage are on. And I have absolutely no doubt that David Cameron's commitment, which is to mature, sustained, loving relationships supported by the state, is right, that he'll stick by it, and that it applies to gay men and lesbian women and to heterosexual men and women equally. I brought along lots of statistics, lots of dates, the dates of all the marriage acts, the evidence that the state has always intervened to define from the state's point of view what marriage is, often against the opinion of the churches, that there's nothing, absolutely nothing new about the state saying that this is what's going to constitute a legal marriage, that you, in your faith, can say what you believe to be a marriage in your faith. Most evidently is the fact that you can get divorced from a legal marriage. You can't get divorced, except in very special circumstances, from a Catholic marriage. No problem. We each call marriage what, according to our own faith or non-faith, we want to. But the state has to have an institution. It's marriage. It applies to two people who want to commit to each other. That should be a conservative value. It's one I support, and I hope that David Cameron sticks to it, and I'm absolutely sure, in fact, that he will.
Thank you very much. Let's go to the Bishop next.
Thank you. All long-term and cross-cultural research has shown that a mother, a father, and children are absolutely at the heart of family, even in extended family situations. Now, the Church has certainly not invented marriage. It is a natural institution to which there are very, very few and rare exceptions. What I think from the Church's point of view has been important is the idea of consent, the idea of mutuality, against pagan ideas of marriage, for example, of mutual responsibility, and also love. St. Augustine, whose name cannot be avoided, I'm afraid, when we talk about marriage, talked about the contractual aspect of marriage, which had to do with, obviously, the care of children. I mean, human children take a very long time to grow up, but also security for the partner. He talked about commitment, which had to do with treating the other as a person and not simply as a means to the satisfaction of our own ends. And thirdly, about the coming together in a one flesh union. Now, this is the crunch, where it is the difference that brings about the union. Christians can never say men are from Mars, women are from Venus. They are not entirely different species. Nevertheless, there is a similarity in difference which makes for a fundamental complementarity. Sexual, social, psychological, that makes for the union, the longevity of the union and the fidelity of the union. Now, I do recognize, of course, that there are many other kinds of human relationships. Of course there are. From time to time, people may feel that some of those relationships need the protection of law, or people in those relationships need the protection of law. I'm not against that. In fact, I would favor widening the civil partnerships provision, and in fact we try to do this in the House of Lords to people who are in some kind of relationship where protection for them is needed, legal protection. But you can't reduce all relationships to marriage. I mean, I completely disagree with Matthew about this. You know, charity is a term which is a class of all classes. But marriage is not a class of all classes. Marriage is actually a specific relationship. So we can, of course, protect other relationships while at the same time regarding marriage as specific. Now, just finally, there are some things that we need to do to enrich marriage itself in our culture. One is preparation. This is very patchy, particularly for civil marriage. I mean, the churches do whatever they can, better or worse, by way of preparation, but there is no preparation for people entering civil marriage. I think this is disastrous for the country and for the future of the country. Secondly, we need to give more attention to parenting, by which I mean not gender-neutral parenting, but mothering and fathering, because all the research tells us that fathers relate to children differently from how mothers relate to them, and vice versa. Thirdly, preference in the tax system. I mean, David Cameron is being praised to the heights about his stance on marriage and family, but he did promise preference for marriage in the tax system. How that's worked out, we can discuss. But any attempt to recognize marriage and family in the tax system has not really been looked at with favor in this government. And then finally, preachers are allowed, I think, more than one finally, the question of prenuptials. In the United States, some states are now saying, because of easy divorce, no-fault divorce without consent. I mean, what is that? That's not even contractual. Because of that, couples are entering into specific agreements before they marry about, for instance, the grounds for divorce, what might be, you know, so that this is not just frivolous. And indeed, what might be done if a marriage gets into difficulty by way of counseling and so on. So I think that is what I would want to say about marriage as such, and what we may, how we may assess other sorts of relationships in that context. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. Tim Montgomery, finally. Tim, if I'm allowed to say this, you've had quite a all on the road to Damascus conversion about the whole area of homosexuality and gay marriage and civil partnership. Perhaps in your remarks, if you could put that in context.
Yeah, I will try to, Andrew. Thank you very much for Phillip and ResPublica for holding this event. And yes, I have been on a journey, Andrew, but I'm slightly thrown by, at the start of this meeting, Matthew Parris even saying I had a camp haircut. That's probably going too far.
He's going to grow it.
I can totally grow it now. I don't know whether many of you heard the Today programme this morning, but they had a discussion on equal marriage, and it was very much posited, the whole discussion, as a contrast and a dispute between social conservatives and social liberals. And in the sense that on one side there were the social liberals who supported equal marriage, same-sex marriage, and social conservatives who didn't. And of course it's largely true, a lot of social conservatives are in the equal conservative, equal marriage camp. But actually I have been on this journey that Andrew mentioned because I am a social conservative, and I believe that as many people as possible should be involved in institutions that promote stability and bring people together. I'm not a libertarian. I'm someone who believes that actually the whole development of social capital, promotion, whether it is of charity or certain skills in life, trust, relationships between people, stability, I think there is an incredibly important role in public policy for all of those things to be promoted. I think a government that just sees only individuals and the state, I think there are actually accomplices. And libertarianism and socialism, I think, are almost two sides of the same coin, separating each other from Burkean institutions that I think are so important to conservatives. Where I hope that we will end up is in a public policy that promotes an institution that doesn't just connect the two people who join in a marriage, but actually marriage is so much more in connecting people with each other, not just with children, but with extended families. And that's the huge importance of marriage, and that's why I want to maximise the number of people who who join it. It is a completely different relationship from cohabitation. There's a public nature to it. There's a ceremony, there are anniversaries. People are much more involved in the institution than any other kind of cohabitation or a relationship that people have slid into rather than decided to join. Where I hope we will end up is for gay people to be equal members of socialising, conservatising institutions. Religious liberty absolutely protected. I hope that what we don't have is an intolerance of the old being replaced by a new intolerance, whereby people of serious Christian conviction cannot take a different view from what is potentially a form of new, soft totalitarianism. And then the third thing I would say is that I think one of the reasons why I'm on this journey is that I want marriage to become an incredibly popular and central institution to conservatism again. And I think this not reinvention, but certainly renewal of marriage, making it central to society again, socially modern, if you like, but still with all of its traditional strengths, means that we can have the sort of, I think, public policy that the Bishop talked about. I want us to invest hugely in marriage preparation. I want us to have the kind of marriage tax allowance that nearly every country in Europe and the developed world has, and the kind of support when relationships break down. And then I think we will have the much more socially constructive, socially conservative institutions which work alongside work and education. I think marriage and the family are the essence of the conservative approach to the good society. Thank you.
Okay, now before I open it up to the floor, I just want to ask a few questions. Matthew, if I could ask you, you're in a civil partnership.
Yeah.
Do you regard Julian as, for want of a better expression, your husband? And if gay marriage is introduced, will you change your status, or will you stick with a civil partnership?
If gay marriage is introduced...
Here's the mic.
If gay marriage is introduced, we'll probably upgrade, I suppose. I don't myself feel comfortable with words like husband and wife. I see no reason why under the overall term marriage you might not have men whose partners were men and men whose partners were women. There's no obligation to say husband or wife, and it isn't one that I would choose.
Okay. Bishop, Tim raised the idea of the church. Opponents of gay marriage, one of the things they say is at the moment the government say they will write into the legislation protection from churches so that they can't be compelled to conduct gay marriages on religious premises. And the opponents say, yeah, but then they'll go to Europe, the European Court of Human Rights. Is that something you're exercised about?
Well, may I first say that the church's concern should be not just about themselves, but about a public doctrine of marriage for the country. I mean, that is my primary concern. But yes, I think there is a concern with the churches and other religious communities that if exemptions are given in the nature of the case under the Human Rights Act or the European Convention, they can be and indeed are challenged. And the Church of England's official statement states clearly that they feel that the assurances being given cannot be regarded as safe.
Okay, I want to clarify something else, Bishop, I can ask you. The Church of England's own position, of course, on homosexuality is incoherent. Would you accept that? You can have gay priests as long as they don't have sex. I don't quite know how the Church of England enforces that edict. Perhaps you could enlighten us. And there are no gay bishops at all.
Yes, I think the Church of England's official position is in the 1987 resolution passed by General Synod, which upholds marriage as the sole place for sexual expression. What has happened since is that bishops, other pastors, and the church generally has tried to adopt pastoral approaches to people in other sorts of situations. I mean, pastors do that in their studies all the time to find the least worst options for people. But that does not in any way obscure the official position of the Church of England as of most other Christian churches.
And should the Church of England be changing its position?
With regard to what?
Sexuality.
No, I don't think so, because the Church of England's position is not solely its own. It represents what the universal church has believed and taught for thousands of years. It has to do with a basic institution of society. So what the church teaches and how pastors deal with people in particular situations are related, but you have to find in all sorts of things, not just sexuality, how to help people where they are.
Okay, Matthew Parris wants to interrupt.
Very, very quick question. Would I be wrong, Bishop, in attributing to you, speaking about homosexuality, the words repent and change?
No, you would not be wrong, because as a bishop I believe that everyone needs to repent and everyone needs to change. I mean, that is my job. And what is wrong? Repentance means a new start, a new mind, renewal of the mind and of life.
Are you going to repent, Matthew?
And I am, may I just finish? I mean, I am constantly, every day, repenting myself.
Do you think that homosexuality is wrong or inappropriate? Yes.
There's a gentleman in the audience. We'll come to you in a second.
Again, if I may start with myself, everything about me is broken. My sexuality is not in any way as God intends sexuality to be. And that is true of all human beings.
No, you have to be a bit more specific. It's a very straightforward question for Matthew Parris.
Well, no, but specifics come from generality. All human beings are in a broken state themselves, every aspect of them, including their sexuality. Now, I say this so that I'm not immediately accused of being self-righteous. I'm not taking any kind of moral high ground. We are all in the same situation. But yes, in that context, I do not believe, as the Church of England teaches officially, I believe that homosexuality falls short of God's purposes for human beings, but then so do many other kinds of sexual affairs.
Okay, let's move on. Philip Blond wants to speak, and I want to go to Tim about the political ramifications of this.
Yeah, I just want to profoundly agree with what Tim Montgomery said and his wishes and hopes for marriage, and I'm utterly with you on that. But I also want to pick up on what Matthew said. Once you remove the idea there's anything particular to heterosexuality, you actually do strip husband and wife from that language, and I think Matthew very coherently has shown this. But what that does is that destroys difference, and that because men and women are not the same, and one of the ways they're not the same is women have children and men don't. And one of the greatest penalties paid by women in our society is we had 1960s feminism that said women are the same as men, and they modelled women on patriarchy, and that means we had the worst maternity rights, the worst records, and women in our society suffer when they have children. They drop out of work, and they often go back at part-time at low rates. So in order to deal with that, you need to treat women differently in order to gain equity. So the idea that equality is the way in which you achieve justice is, I think, wrong. And actually, let me quote Peter Tatchell, radical gay activist. And he argued in the 1960s and today is gays should innovate and not assimilate. And I actually think what this act of assimilation will do is destroy heterosexual difference, destroy the idea that men owe something particular to women and women owe something particular to men, which has helped destroy working class marriage. And it also destroys homosexual difference. And I think homosexuals are different from heterosexuals. And what I don't want to do is ignore that. I want to celebrate it. And I'm arguing for something more radical than gay marriage. I'm arguing that the church needs to religiously recognise civil partnerships. That's more radical than gay marriage. But if we get a situation where heterosexuality is made war on by homosexuality because homosexuality says there is nothing particular to you, that will create prejudice. That will create the opposite of what is intended. And so I think a free and fair society doesn't make war on independent groups. Otherwise, where are we? Because, of course, Jewish education isn't equal because it's Jewish, and Muslim education isn't equal because it's Muslim. So let's stop this illiberal logic.
Philip, thank you, Philip. Tim, can I ask you politically, you're from Conservative home, gay marriage has had a traumatic effect on Tory party membership. Tory party activists don't support it. It wasn't in the manifesto. It's a Liberal Democrat idea. Politically, do you think Cameron is doing a good or bad thing?
I should think he probably wish he hadn't started this.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not sure it's true that it wasn't in the manifesto. I have to check it. He certainly said. He certainly said, though, in one of his first party conference speeches.
It wasn't in any manifesto, actually. It was at the Liberal Democrat conference in 2010.
That he wanted to introduce it. And one of my regrets is, if you go back to when he first did talk about the fact that he supported marriage between a man and a man, a woman and a woman, he also said that he wanted to introduce a tax recognition, a recognition of marriage into the tax system. And I think we have one of the things that I think is meant it's extra difficult for the Conservative Party to sell to the church and the Christian groups, is that we kind of have the equalisation reform, if you like, without the tax allowance. And it's I think it would have been a more balanced proposition and a more winning proposition if we had the tax allowance as well. There's provision in the coalition agreement for the Liberal Democrats to abstain on the Conservative Chancellor bringing forward a marriage tax allowance. And I regret that it hasn't been introduced, because actually if you look at the evidence, because the marriage tax allowance largely will benefit one-earner couples, whereas two-earner couples are particularly benefiting from the rise in the tax threshold. Not only is a marriage tax allowance pro-marriage, pro-stability, it's actually pro-poor as well. Poor people benefit much more from the kind of marriage tax allowance. So it should all, I find it very frustrating that this hasn't been introduced as a part, because, you know, as I began with, one of the reasons I support this is because I see it as a move into a more pro-marriage, pro-social institution. A final comment, if I may. The politics of it, if he regrets perhaps starting it in the first place, the politics are incredibly difficult now, because although the people perhaps who are most voluble on this issue are Christians and other traditionalists who oppose what he's doing, polling, quite detailed polling by Lord Ashcroft, now also says that if there was to be a reversal of David Cameron's position, many people, particularly younger people, would see it as a sign of weakness and failure of the modernising project. So I think he has no choice but to press ahead. But Conservative MPs have rightly been given a free vote on this issue.
Okay, now I want to get some questions from the audience. I know this gentleman in the second row is going to be very provocative, so be as provocative as you like. Can you say who you are?
Yeah, sorry. Do you want me to stand up?
You can stand up if you like. Yeah. We can all see you then.
Duncan Boyd, Church Society. Could I just ask, I was grateful for Tim Montgomery's comments about a soft totalitarianism. Could the panel confirm that they agree that there is and there ought to be a place in the Conservative Party for Christians who hold the traditional view of Christians that homosexual activity is wrong?
Yeah, I'm going to take. We take 2 or 3 questions, and then the gentleman in the front.
Mohammed Amin, Vice Chairman of the Conservative Muslim Forum and also a libertarian. What does the panel think about my view that the confusion comes because we use the same word, marriage, to talk about a legal relationship recognised by the state and a private relationship either between 2 people who have no religious views or a religious relationship depending upon their religious views, and that if the state simply gave civil partnerships to all as the only legally recognised relationship and then let people get on to live their sexual lives as they wished, the heat would go out of the issue.
Right. Matthew, I want to ask you first about the first question about should there be a tolerance of people in the Tory party who think homosexuality is wrong?
Yes, I would give a completely unequivocal yes to that answer. I think that there should be tolerance within the Conservative Party of all sorts of views, with some of which I would violently disagree. With that I violently disagree, but I wouldn't dream of thinking that someone couldn't call themselves a Conservative because they thought homosexuality was wrong. I wouldn't dream of it. And I hope that is reciprocated on the other side, that people understand that people of my point of view and my persuasion are also naturally part of the Conservative Party.
Which is a good point.
Being deselected. Why are Christians being deselected? As you know, there are at least 2 cases of deselection.
So the question here is, why are Christians being deselected? I think probably the gentleman means, what is it, anti-gay Christians? So why are anti-gay people being deselected? Presumably because it may be thought that they wouldn't be particularly attractive to the voters. We mentioned opinion polls. There's a populist opinion poll that finds that 67% of the public are in favour of gay marriage, and 53% of people who voted Conservative at the last election are in favour of gay marriage.
Okay, let's go to the
So in
Bishop.
fact,
Sorry, we'll move on.
Yeah, I mean, opinion polls and opinion polls. There are so many, and we can prove so many things from them. But I was interested that the question was about the Conservative Party. This is a Conservative Party conference, so I suppose it's understandable. But I would like to extend that. I mean, why just the Conservative Party? Why not the nation? And what Matthew has just said about welcoming people who are opposed to equalization of this kind within the party, what about the nation? I mean, one of the problems we've had in recent years is that Britain's famous toleration of conscience has been noticeably absent in the so-called equality legislation. And respect for conscience, whether at the workplace or in the political arena, is absolutely important for the nation, not just the party. And following that, and learning from the United States in this case, the idea of reasonable accommodation of people's beliefs and the manifestation of those beliefs, as long as they do not undermine for example, an employer's business, they do not undermine that, or the provision of a service as such. Why should these things not be looked for in the nation as a whole?
Can I ask you, Bishop, are you tolerant of homosexuals?
Well, indeed, I totally uphold their freedom to believe and to do as they wish. But that is not the issue. The issue at the moment is that what Christians and other people of faith believe and how they wish to manifest their belief is not being respected.
Okay.
Were you in favour of an equal age of consent?
I was not in favour of an equal age of consent, and so were not many people who were in favour of gay relationships. That had to do with vulnerability, it had to do with how sexuality is fixed, and I wrote a joint article with someone who was actually in favour of gay relationships, but who was also against lowering the age of consent. I mean, that's a different issue.
So what age would you have had a gay age of consent, Bishop? Would you have kept it at 21?
As it was, but it was 18.
Yeah, okay. Can the gentleman in front, would you like to deal with the gentleman in front's question?
Yes, I think, look, Islam isn't particularly noted for its tolerance of homosexuality. In fact, most of the major world religions condemn homosexual practices. And yet, the point is, we're all human beings, and we're all developed, and we all move by degree. And politics is fundamentally a form of persuasion. So I completely agree with Matthew. We would want Muslims to be in the Conservative Party, even though they might have beliefs that aren't in accord with what might be a majority. But I think Christianity actually is the faith that has moved most radically to try to include homosexuality. We have even Catholicism has, through its doctrine of personhood, is now trying to deal with it. And that's why I think my call for a Christian recognition and celebration of homosexual relationship is far more radical than a formal legalistic marriage. Because actually, I speak to gay people and say, what we really want is religious acceptance of the validity of our relationships. And I believe in that, but I think religions will only be able to do that if they don't feel it threatens the institution of the family. And at the moment, what we have is homosexual equality threatening a heterosexual institution. And we've already had that from Matthew, the loss of the language of man and woman, the loss of the language of the different relationships and roles we owe across sex and gender. And I think that's a disaster. So I'm in favour, I believe that actually Christianity is the progressive religion. It's Christianity that's moving more than any other faith group, I would argue, towards recognising the ontological status and celebrating the ontological status of homosexuality. But should we accept those who don't agree? Absolutely, because it's a conversation and that's what matters.
Tim, we know that a number of churches, Anglican churches, are talking about individually whether they should bless civil partnerships. What do you think they should be compelled to as part of the legislation?
Well, certainly not compelled to. I think the challenge for the church is Phillip, one of the Christian writers I most admire, recently wrote about this, and he said he was sat down on an aeroplane recently, introduced himself as an evangelical Christian, and the second question that he was asked was, "What are your view on homosexuality?" And this is the huge, I think, challenge for the church now. This has become an incredibly distorting issue for the church, rather than the church being known for its followership of Jesus, for all that represents. I'm afraid, certainly in the public square, it has become hugely associated with fighting culture wars, particularly in America. I don't know how the church I love deals with this issue, but I think it's incredibly important, I think, and I respect what Matthew has just said. I think it's incredibly important for true liberals to give the church space to work its way through all of this. I think historic change is underway, and imposing views on the church is thoroughly illiberal and will produce, I think, a very unhealthy backlash that won't be good for anyone. The role of the church in society, in schooling, in philanthropy, in voluntarism is enormous. We should be celebrating the church, all of us as conservatives, and I think we should be respecting its ability to disagree with perhaps what is now a dominant view of society.
Okay, there's lots of questions. I'm going to take three. Lady at the back, gentleman there, and the other lady at the back. So there's two ladies at the back. Yeah. There's a mic coming.
My question, Sharon James, Coalition for Marriage. If marriage is a loving union between two committed people, reduced to loving commitment, I'm not sure the government exists to be cheerleaders for romance. What's the logical and moral reason to limit it to a loving commitment between two people? Why not three? I have a Quaker Christian newsletter advocating plural unions. I've been on the Universalist website, which advocates plural unions. I lived for many years in Toronto, and every Toronto grade school now has posters up with loving couples and loving triples, because if marriage is just about love and commitment, I fail to see why it shouldn't be three or more. Very loving, very committed people who might live in the same household, might bring up children together, might be related. There might be all sorts of very, very good reasons, and some of them see that it is their human rights. Okay. So my question, logical and moral reasons to limit it to two.
So a new version of a threesome, the lady at the very back.
I'm Andrew Williams. I'm director of the Christian Legal Centre, and therefore have been responsible for many of the cases that have come before the courts where there has been a genuine clash between the Christian's right to uphold conscience and homosexual practice. So what we've seen is many cases foster workers unable to keep their positions, social workers unable to keep their positions, civil registrars unable to keep their positions. Tim is absolutely right about the place of the church in society, and of course, but Jesus was absolutely clear about his love for every individual, no matter what their colour, creed, sexual orientation. But he also made very clear statements on sexual practice, that all sexual practice should be within the context of marriage. So, in a sense, although what the panellists are doing here is saying that we need to accept homosexual practice in effect, and then even potentially apply that to the church, when if a church is upholding biblical standards, it will simply be unable to do that because it violates the clear teaching of Jesus. So there's a real, genuine conflict, not born out of hatred, not born out of hatred for one moment, born out of love. And increasingly what's happening, certainly from my position, is that Christians are left out in the cold. There is no room for them. As soon as we say something, we're immediately branded phobic and hateful and intolerant. We simply are not. We simply uphold the teachings of Jesus, whom we love very much and whom we believe can point people to hope.
All right, thank you. And there's a gentleman there in the pinstripe suit. It's a Tory conference, you need a pinstripe suit. Get that chap there.
Yeah, sorry.
I'm behind you, sorry. I want a pinstripe.
So yes, my point has been touched on by the lady and by the bishop, but would the panel be content to see state employees, state paid for, state sponsored employees lose their livelihoods as a result of a new orthodoxy if they're unwilling to propagate that new orthodoxy.
So you're talking about a registrar or someone like that, are you? Yeah, okay. Yeah, well, let's deal with the threesomes question first, Matthew. What do you think about that?
I would first very briefly like to answer Mohammed Amin's question, because no one has answered.
Yeah.
No one has answered it. Yes, you're absolutely right, and the logical position, the one I advocated at the beginning, but logic never gets anywhere in politics, is that the state should get out of the business of defining the word marriage altogether, and that the state should simply set up what they have in South Africa, an institution called civil union, and a man and a woman take out a civil union in South Africa, and a man can take out a civil union in South Africa. Nobody gets a marriage blessed by the state in South Africa. That's left up to the church. That's the logical position.
The bishop's looking horrified, Matthew.
Yes, well, I dare say, but do you want to quite rejoin?
Yeah, yes. I mean, I totally disagree, because I think the state needs to have a view about marriage, because marriage results in the basic unit of society, the family. That's the reason for the state's involvement.
Okay.
Well, I do think the state needs a view about marriage. I think an awful lot of marriages are not for the procreation of children, never were intended to be, and never were. The threesomes, well, our idea at the moment of the idea of the word romance, I think, is between two people. I find it hard to envisage myself what a romance between three people would be like, and I think in terms of the values of the state, yes, well, I suppose but yes, and indeed, in some of the world's major religions, marriage does allow somebody to marry more than one person. I'm quite happy if they want to use marriage in that way. It's entirely up to them, which is not the way I would use it.
Okay,
no, of course not.
Tim, can I ask you to deal with the point about this moot point about people, should they lose their jobs, a registrar, if they refuse to conduct a civil partnership, which of course is the law? How do you handle that?
I think one of the distinctions I would make is if you, for example, in the abortion laws, we have a right to an abortion in the society, but no doctor is required to perform an abortion. Their job security is completely protected on an issue of conscience. And I think, for example, one area where I recently, when the public policy went too far, was in the whole area of gay adoption. The right to gay adoption was put into law, but unlike in the abortion precedent, it was actually decided that the Catholic Adoption Agency couldn't dissent from the law. So a different principle was applied to the gay equality agenda, to the abortion agenda. And I think we need to find a way of carving out a place in public policy where gay people can have the rights that they feel rightly they're entitled to, but Christians also have complete freedom to dissent from that culture and carve out a space where they do no harm to others, where they're not hateful, but actually they have a right to, and the very clear views that Christians, people in the Coalition for Marriage support, and Christians are, I know lots of people like Andrea who are absolutely sincere in their views. There's not a hateful bone in Andrea's body, and we need to respect Christians who do genuinely, through deep conviction, disagree with some of the things that have been said in this panel and where public policy is moving.
We're running out of time, so I'm going to ask Phillip to brief it, but I'm going to take one more question.
I'm very grateful that Matthew is here, because he's showing very clearly how marriage will be destroyed, because we already now have, say, well, it'd be fine not just to have 3 but 7 or 8, and there are religious practices out there, but the point is that actually loving relationships only survive within institutions. If you love everybody, you love nobody. And why marriage works is it's a form of discipline. It's a form of discipline, and everybody, and it changes your orientation. And the point is that's why you need an institution particular to heterosexuals. And you also need an institution particular to homosexuals, because homosexuals also need orientation and guidance to maintain relationships just as heterosexuals. But what Matthew is because he's a visionary, clever man, is giving you an account of what will happen. Marriage can mean anything, and it can mean any number of partners, and it can mean any number of relationships, because after all, that's their choice. And once we have the idea that actually it's all about choice and there's no role for institutions, we essentially are involved in social breakdown, and we don't realise it, because institutions are what direct people, are what form people. And if we destroy the foundational of the family, which, as Tim so ably has argued, is the building block of our society in the war against poverty and atomisation, then we're not conservatives.
Okay, no, we're running out. We've got time for 2 questions. The lady with the glasses, if you could say who you are, and David in the back. Let's go ladies first, please. Say who you are.
Thanks, sir. My name's Ruth, and I work for Stonewall, but I'm not actually going to say anything from that perspective right now. I'm a lesbian, and I'm a Catholic, and I entered into a civil partnership 2.5 years ago that I refer to as a marriage. We had a Christian ceremony conducted in secret, because the person who conducted it couldn't let anyone know that that was what he was doing. We are incredibly saddened by the way we are consistently excluded, both in the public discourse and the private discourse, by people of faith. And I go to church every Sunday, and every Sunday we have to pray for the maintenance of the family, and we have to pray that our legislators will maintain that family. I don't consider myself excluded from that prayer, but lots do. And I just wonder what the panel think about whether this is an effective recruitment policy on behalf of the church, who isn't doing particularly well on recruitment generally, by excluding people who want to be part of that family and want to be part of that institution that reflects the sanctity of their relationship.
Thank you. And then just behind you, last question.
David from Boys Magazine. This is a Conservative conference, not a Christian conference, and it's a Conservative conference with the intention of getting a majority in 2015. I think it's ironic that Phillip should mention Peter Tatchell, who is a Labour candidate, is now a Green Party supporter, and the gay community has been traditionally, as Andrew and Matthew will tell you, an extraordinary left-wing hotbed of activism and anti-conservatism, and I just want to know how the panel intend to win over lesbian and gay votes if they reject gay marriage.
Well, let's ask the Bishop first to respond to Ruth. How do you deal with that sense of alienation that clearly, Bishop, many gay people feel who go to your churches?
Well, I think the first thing is to say, without any qualification, that gay people are totally welcome in churches. There should be no question about that, and that is of course true of other sorts of people as well. So welcoming is of course not the same thing as affirming everything about people. I mean, when I go to church, I expect the church to challenge me in those things that the church knows to be wrong about me, and I'm constantly in fact challenged in those ways, whether that is about how I handle money or my sex life or whatever it may be. And I think that must be true of everyone, including gay people. But on the question of welcoming and of giving them a voice and a space, there should be no question at all for them as for anyone else.
Very excited, before I ask the other panellists to talk on the last question, have you ever blessed a civil partnership, Bishop, and would you?
No, the church blesses marriage because marriage is a specific
recruit. I don't know, but were the Conservative Party to think that it was going to recruit new members and enlarge its base in the country by turning into the homophobic party that it once was, it would be making a very serious practical mistake. No question about it. And as to this whole business of the churches, I do find something odious in people who, in a subterranean way, seek the right to exclude, to disapprove of, and to persecute other people, representing themselves as the victims of intolerance, because their intolerance is not being tolerated.
Phillip Blond.
Just to speak to, I want to be in a situation where your relationship is blessed in public in a Christian context. I'm a former theologian. I lectured probably for far too long in various universities. That's what I want. And what to me, since Christianity upholds a plural society and believes in a plural society, what to me would be the disaster when we can't recognise and celebrate your difference, but the only way to legitimise you is to make you the same as others. And that to me is homophobic, and that's what I'm against. And so for me it's imperative, really, and lots of gay people argue exactly this, and the reason I was quoting Peter Tatchell is precisely because I think that allows me to make the point that actually, if you really want to respect homosexuality, accept it as a distinction that is valid in and of itself, and not use it as a way to destroy a distinction that's proper to heterosexuals.
Okay, finally, Tim Montgomery, we talked about your own journey. Do you think the Conservative Party, if it doesn't go ahead with gay marriage, it's going to damage its relationship with the gay community even more? Or even if it goes ahead with it, is it going to change the attitude of the gay community to the Tory party?
Well, I may be a hopeless optimist in this regard, but I actually think the Conservative Party can keep Christians and gay people on side at the same time. And I know people like Ruth would put themselves in both of those camps, but I think if you look at what the Conservative government, the coalition government, has already done on homophobic bullying, on forgiving the sort of criminal records of gay people who've been persecuted in the past, the gay marriage issue obviously, introducing persecution of gay people as a consideration in aid policy and aid discussions with developing nations. There's a lot there, but at the same time the Conservative Party must protect religious liberty, it must back marriage in the tax system, it must ensure there is equally a dimension of consideration of religious persecution in its aid and development policies. And I think it is not possible for a broad, ambitious Conservative Party to achieve both of these things simultaneously, and that is, I hope, what the leap of imagination our party leadership can take.
Okay, it's nearly 11 o'clock, so I'm going to wind it up here. I want to thank our panel. We have Matthew Parris, of course, columnist in the Times, Bishop Michael Nazir-Ali, Tim Montgomery, Phillip Blond. I'm Andrew Pearson. Thank you for coming and enjoy the Prime Minister's speech.